This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Sometimes your life doesn't work, and sometimes you make really bad decisions. Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you hurt people either on purpose or inadvertently.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are waiting for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk. Warning.
This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening and or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, I grew up in New York City, and one thing that hasn't been talked about a lot that I feel should be talked about a lot is the fact that there's a high incarceration rate amongst our community. For violence, or when I was coming up in that time, violence, drugs, in the time that I was coming up during the war against drugs. And as I got older, I started to realize that a lot of the people that I was around may have had some type of mental disorders. And even now with the homeless rate, it's really high, and we see homeless people acting out in the streets and stuff like that. And if you ever took the time to talk to someone, they may have some kind of something that can be helped with some type of mental diagnosis and remedy that goes beyond the scope of medicine, that goes beyond the scope of incarceration. Because a lot of times those are the things that we either we put them on the medicine or we lock them up. And we don't spend enough time exploring that. We don't spend enough time having those conversations. And I know a lot of people that I know are still suffering from mental health challenges. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And, we're going to have that conversation today. This is a real serious conversation, but it's one that's necessary. How you doing, Dr. Fred?
I'm doing good. We don't have to make it too serious, and we can keep some levity and some fun in it. You got a good point there about the people who have been diagnosed with mental illness and or some sort of mental condition and could use our help. And you have some really good points there. So I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, why is it that we lean, when I say we, society leans to lock them up or just to medicate without really trying to get a true understanding and to wrap their mind around alternatives and other things that may be helpful, such as mindfulness. I'm a mindfulness coach, or maybe some of the things that we'll be exploring today. But why is it just that we lean towards one over the other or the other?
Yeah. So incarceration or hospitalization or medication are all ways to contain society. So in some ways, what we have here is you're asking a question why, as if society is built to empower or strengthen the populace, but that is not what society is built to do.
Well,
And in reality, society is built to contain us and to keep us in our four walls and to make sure that we don't, cause too much trouble. So with medications and, with incarcerations and with hospitalizations, you have an opportunity to physically or chemically just lock somebody up and make it so that they can't really carry out whatever it is. Maybe you could say the revolution or some fighting back or some access to true voice that otherwise is being blocked is the purpose of society to prevent too much opposition.
how did you get into this work? What was your motivation?
Yeah, so I'm a psychiatrist. I've been a psychiatrist for 36 years. And before that, I was in childcare work. I was a childcare worker for 9 years. So this will be 45 years coming up this January. So the way I got in this work, it's hard to say what day it really happened, but it might have happened the day that I arrived here on Earth. You see, I had two brothers. They were 10 and 14 years older than me. And then I had my parents. And things were not going well in the home, is what I understand. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of conflict, disarray. There was a lot of trouble going on. And I was called on to bring joy and happiness and love to a family that was in that degree of disarray. And so I arrived as a bundle of joy. That's what I was here to do, is to heal by bringing joy and love into a family that was in chaos. And, I found myself just kind of fitting that role over the years. Now, I did a very good job probably for the first year or two. And I think my brothers would agree it hasn't been consistent for all 66 years. But there's been an opportunity for me to actually be a healer through communication and connection. And that started back then. When I was in my playpen, I remember watching my brothers speak to my parents and me wishing that someday I'd be able to talk like a big boy, the whole thing. And when I got into elementary school, that's what I was hoping that they would, teach me. But instead, in elementary school, they taught me how to sit down, how to be quiet, and how to do exactly what the teacher says. That was not the same thing as open discussion or open discourse. And I just went through school just longing to learn how to communicate. And I went to elementary school. It was not very helpful for that purpose. And then I thought, well, maybe the big kids learn it in junior high. So I went to junior high and it was even worse. And then I went to high school and it was even worse again, meaning that they just really wanted me to be quiet, sit down, and follow directions. Eventually, I decided that they must be learning how to communicate on the college campuses. So I ended up going to college, 40 miles to the west, really cool helmets. I decided that I was bred to be University of Michigan. And I went to University of Michigan for a year and a half, studying engineering school because I had really good math scores. See, my brothers taught me all sorts of stuff before I even went to school. So I knew how to read in simple math, and I knew how to write a little bit, even when in kindergarten. So I was always ahead of the class, right? And I decided that I'd try University of Michigan and see if there was anything there for me. And as an engineer, it wasn't what my future was going to be built in. So I eventually dropped out of college, got on a Greyhound bus, and went all the way across the country to Berkeley, California, where I was hoping to find myself. And I did find myself. It was a good summer, but it wasn't sustainable. My family convinced me that there was this new industry that they thought I would be good at, that was just breaking through, and they thought the future would be really important on this industry. The name of the industry, you might have heard of it, is computers. And I decided that I would, try out this thing called, I didn't even know what a computer was, but I knew there was one at the University of Michigan. So back to the University of Michigan I went, and I spent the next, several quarters actually doing Fortran and COBOL and batch jobs and punch cards and getting, there was a 2-acre facility that was called the computer. And we used to sit there all night long and just fill out these batch cards. And that wasn't going to be my life either. I just decided that I'm not going to do that throughout, the rest of the way. So I dropped out a second time and promised that I would never, ever go back to school for any reason whatsoever. And my family, my mom this time, she's like, yeah, that's okay, but you still have to get a job. And so I was like, okay, Mom, whatever. So she got me an application for a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And I started as a child care worker right then, hoping to stay just 3 weeks, by the way. That was my intention.
45 years later.
Just for orientation. I thought I'd get 3 paychecks, and then I'd get that money, about $1,000, buy myself a car, and then drive around the country and figure out what my life was about. But on the 4th week, I was convinced to go up to the floors, and that's what I did. Me and Paul went up to the floors, and I began really working to be a communicator, to be effective, to connect with these so-called kids, troubled kids. But I didn't see them as troubled kids. I just saw them as other human beings, and that's how I've seen my clients ever since. So the idea is that I don't see people with like a mental illness. I never see anyone. I don't care if they're living on the streets. I don't care if they're in the hospital. I don't care if they're incarcerated. I don't see anybody with mental illness because that isn't how I see people. It's just not how I see people. So meaning that the diagnosis you have is you. That's your NaRon is your diagnosis. You don't have bipolar. You don't have ADHD. You don't have schizophrenia. You don't have PTSD. You don't have any other alphabet soup diagnosis. If you really take a look at it, all you have is you. You have your life. You've had points in time where you're very uncomfortable, maybe even miserable, not feeling well. You have time when you're confused, when you're afraid, when you're anxious, you're depressed, when you're terrified. I mean, today might be a good day. There's a lot of people who are terrified this morning waking up. I can tell you that. Many, many people are waking up today very terrified, maybe more terrified than they've ever been. And that's happening today, this morning, as we speak. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you to have experiences that are very uncomfortable. We don't blame a log for burning in a fire. And we should not blame us for actually having a response to a system that is extremely challenging, extremely obstacle ridden. There's so many hurdles and so many things to actually try to keep in place.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
It can be very disorienting and disorganizing. And when you feel uncomfortable that there's some sort of depression or some sort of anxiety or fear or awkwardness or distractibility, you could theoretically just see that that's you being you in a world that's nearly impossible to negotiate. It's completely okay to be you. Completely okay. And, it's funny. People just want to have diagnoses. They're very, very, you mentioned the word diagnoses in your introduction, as if that's helpful, as if I come into a doctor and, it's funny, psychiatry is different than other fields, meaning as a psychiatrist, if I tell somebody that I think they're okay, they have a right to get very pissed at me. It's kind of funny. Like that's not true in other medical subspecialties. If an oncologist says you're okay, you're like happy with it. If a cardiologist says you're okay, you're like, yay. If a psychiatrist says you're okay, you're like, I'm going to go to a real psychiatrist. I'm going to find somebody who can actually give me a diagnosis. See, we don't go there to find out if there's something wrong with us. We go there to find what's wrong with us. And so, ever since I graduated, I went back. I stayed in that job for a number of years. And then I really didn't like psychiatry. That's why I went into psychiatry. I hated the way that psychiatry was going. The whole direction of medication, the whole direction of not listening, the whole direction of being, of like biological psychiatry or chemical imbalance theory. I wasn't very interested in any of that. I didn't feel it was honest or true. I didn't feel it was very helpful. In the hospital with those so-called kids, Jimmy and Johnny would get in a fight or Timmy would be up too late and the psychiatrist would come down from his call room and interview, Timmy for like 5 or 10 seconds, then interview us for another 10 seconds and go into the nursing station, write a note. And we'd have to go retrieve Timmy and hold him down on the ground in the quiet room and jam him full of some injectable cocktail that would put him into a stupor. And if he went into a stupor for the next 12 or 24 hours, we would write on the note that it was a success story. And I just could not live with that. That just was too barbaric for me. It was, it was cold and unpleasant and kind of brutal. So I didn't like the direction psychiatry was going in, and I knew that communication was really the essence of the whole point. So I went into psychiatry hoping to bring communication back into the field. My brother, 14 years older than me, was already a psychiatrist, and he was somewhat along those lines, or a little bit in the same space. He hasn't written any medicine for anyone. He's now 80. He's never written a prescription for anyone. So he was an influence for me. And then as I came out and realized what my job really was after I was done with my medical school in Chicago and then residency and then fellowship, I now was a diagnostician and a medicator as well. I mean, that's just how I got typecast. That's the sunken costs. And most of those prescriptions are not aligned with what I think was the right intervention. So I wrote as they were asked of me. People came in demanding medicine, or the industry that I was working in, the corporation or whatever I was working in. I've worked in every single area known to Western medicine, I think, as a leader position. I've worked in orphanages and homeless shelters and inpatient units, outpatient units, Suboxone clinics, methadone clinics, rehab centers, three-quarter houses, halfway houses, nursing home visits, jails, prisons. I've worked in every single area that I know of that has psychiatry, mental health clinics, et cetera, utilization review. And then, I've seen how psychiatry is delivered around the country. It's very similar from state to state. But I also did another thing, which is I traveled around this country as a traveling doctor, filling in holes where doctors were missing. And I got to see in all the different fields and different areas of the country how psychiatry is delivered. And then I took my act around the world and actually was a psychiatrist in Bhutan and Nepal and Thailand and Israel and France and Italy and England, meaning that I did telepsychiatric work from those countries back into the U.S. I was already a proponent for telepsychiatry, meaning online psychiatry, back in 2013. And I even wrote a course called The Mastering Telehealth in that year that was pretty successful because I could see that the future was here. And so I've spent most of the rest of my career really wondering how can I inject communication and connection into the heart of healing, because it's my understanding, and I don't think I'm speaking alone here, I think we all really know it, is that the most potent medicine known to mankind, the medicine that is most likely to heal and cure whatever your condition is, known to mankind over all time, is a human connection. And when I can help people make a human a pure and honest, golden, core-based, authentic, genuine human connection with another person, then curing takes place. Healing takes place right that minute. Not just for the other person, by the way, for you and for the whole system. So when I teach people how to speak their true voice, unadulterated true voice, that's what I do with my second book called Find Your True Voice and the True Voice course, is I help people actually get in touch with their communication efforts and their authentic self. Then I open up the possibility for that harmonic resonance between two humans, like two tuning forks. And the possibility of communicating and being heard and being seen and, for who you are and who you're not becomes very real when we focus on communication instead of on diagnosing. I'm not very aligned with diagnosing people. It doesn't really help. It separates people. It disenfranchises people. And it gives people a treatment plan. And oftentimes the treatment plan, like the people who are still on the streets or incarcerated, what's one of the things that's happening is that they're taking medicine and treatment that's actually perpetuating the symptoms it's marketed to deal with. So it can actually induce, increase, or even cause the symptoms it's marketed to deal with. And that doesn't make the medicines bad, by the way. There's nothing bad with it. It's not like the medicines there's no such thing as big pharma. Who am I going to call big pharma? What am I talking about? Or the medical industry or the insurance industry or your doctors or the hospital. There's not where the issue is. Those things are just things. They're just in place. Just because it's there doesn't mean that it has to trip you up. Where the problem comes in, and the reason I focused on this in this introduction, NaRon, is that when you think there's something wrong with you, then you think you need to be fixed. Then you come to a psychiatrist, and that's when we give you your diagnosis, which you dearly welcome, because you can now say, that's not me, honey. That's my ADHD. That's not me. That's my bipolar disorder. That's not me. That's my chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. That's not me. I'm on the spectrum. That's not me. I'm a narcissist. That's not me. I'm social anxiety. I got major depression. I've got bipolar disorder. I've got schizoaffective disorder. No, you're just you. You're just you. I totally get it. And sometimes your life doesn't work. And sometimes you make really bad decisions. Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you hurt people either on purpose or inadvertently. And, sometimes you miss a deadline. And sometimes you miss a lot of deadlines. And sometimes you're really afraid. And sometimes you're depressed. Hello and welcome to humanity. And when I really get that's just the bottom line truth of it all, I have a new place to stand from and really help people see that there's a real self right there who's longing to have connection with a human. It's, of course, why we're meeting this morning. The reason you invited me on and had any kind of excitement about this conversation would be that you had a hope that we would connect. And that's exactly what's happening. So, we're just exhibit A of what I mean when I say the communication and connection are at the heart of all healing.
So you have an interesting perspective whereas most people are afraid of where we are in this course of time with the advent of AI and all those things, which will actually take away from human connectivity. It seems to have an intent to take away from human connectivity. But you see something positive that can come out of AI, and talk to me about that.
Yeah, no, AI, it's unclear what the impact of AI is going to be. It opens up a lot of doors for massive human connectivity too, if used in proper hands. They can tell you who you need to talk to, tell you all about them. You can actually have mock conversations with. I could, put your name into ChatGPT and tell them a little bit about yourself that they don't already know, and I could have a mock conversation with you right now to learn what's important to you and be well prepared for our next real, honest human connection. But the interface of AI with mental health and mental illness is a fascinating interface, of course. And what are we giving up when we lean on AI as being the authority? And what are we, what's happening when all of a sudden we realize we're the second most intelligent species on planet?
Oh.
What do we do? We're not geared to learn that we're the second most intelligent
No.
species on the planet. And, that's what's happening with AI, with all the large language models. People are leaning on them because they're so fast and so smart and know so much from, scraping all the historical conversations that have ever taken place in all of time. So, artificial intelligence is here to stay. It's not going to go away. It's an important feature. It does, it can create so many new possibilities in any direction, including the negative direction or the positive direction, but I don't think it's 100% clear that it's going to interfere with human connection. On the other hand, we look around the, country, look around the globe, and we see that almost everybody is tied up into that little device we call a phone and is doing so much to, text or to social media or to email all day long and choosing to do that ahead of communication. So the effort to steal our most valuable commodity, that being our attention, is working. The phone weighs at the right, the colors are the right, the scrolling, the algorithms are amazing, the reels are amazing. I find myself getting caught up, and it seems like the reels have taken a step forward. Like all of a sudden, I'm able to get sucked into my machine for 15 or 30 minutes without doing anything. And, I'm pretty discerning, but they show me enough Cats or show me enough Michael Jordan or show me enough Led Zeppelin, and there I am watching with all sorts of interest,
So from all of that you have ascertained in your 45 years, being that you are well-versed and well-traveled, what does communication, I have this big thing where your introduction where you was talking about school, how school attempts to make cookie cutters, and they attempt to factory make people. This is when you sit, this is when you eat, this is when you do this, but it sucks away from the imagination. How important is the role of communication in tapping into imagination? If someone may be hyperactive, if someone may be a little down, if someone may be more active than another. Just because a person is more active than another doesn't mean that they're hyperactive. Just because a person is having a bad moment or they're a little down because of an event that took place that's that they can't wrap their minds around doesn't mean that they're depressed. How important are the words that we use? How important does it how much intimacy between the words that we use and our imagination as it shapes and develops?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important. Creativity and imagination are really critical pieces. And you're right, we are a cookie cutter nation, and that's the whole point of the psychiatric diagnostic world. The truth is, they have it so homogenized what it is, or what's allowable or what's not allowable before you're called sick. Like, you can be too happy. That's so interesting that you can be too happy. It's just fascinating. You can be so happy to be sick. It's like, or you can want to communicate more than the average person and be sick. It's like, what are you talking about? How is that sick? There's nothing. How is it sick to actually have found satisfaction in life? And the role of imagination is underlined in my first book, which is called Creativity. It's called The Creative Eight: Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. And in that book, we talk about the power of art and music and dancing and singing and drama, cooking, writing, gardening, and how those things actually assist us in finding our own groundedness and our own stability. We utilize those tools. And when we are actually in the act of creating, our discomfort or our dysfunction or our imbalance that we may have been experiencing up to that point tends to disappear while we're being creative. So again, the society, if you will, not that there is such thing as society, the forces that be would be more interested in homogenizing us, putting us in a little box and, creating little tin soldiers. And it's doing a pretty good job, actually, of doing that, because, we speak as if the person on the street is sicker than us. I'm not so sure.
Mm.
No, not so sure that person is sicker than us. They're just not falling into the trip to the, to what we have decided as being a normal human
Being. Because really there's a sense of liberation there, not having to worry about anything and learning how to survive. There's also a sense of survival. There's skills that are being developed from that situation that we may not have. Like if someone came and put me outside and I couldn't find work and I had to try to figure out how to eat outside of EBT or any type of government assistance, it would be daunting at first, but then the brain is so that we adapt and we become creative. I always go back to the archaic self, right? We are so caught up in our creature cultures where the archaic man was more in tune with their senses, their inner being, right? They knew that if they couldn't follow the sun, if they couldn't follow those stars to bring their families to safety, something could happen. They knew when it was time to plant it, they didn't get their crops in on time. No, they didn't go to the corner store and get a sandwich. They had to hunt and gather, and it was their responsibility. The farther along we got away from that, the more our instincts, we lost that instinct of not the instance of survival, but that instance of that they had where they understood. Now we need a GPS and a map and a backup map in case the GPS is telling us something, or, because we don't have that instant anymore where we're connected to the rest of creation. We don't even see ourselves as a part of creation.
Yeah, I think we have lost a lot of our roots. When you talk about archaic man, we still are that person. We just don't practice it anymore. We don't practice the signals of, where is food, where is shelter, what is our contribution of men to keep our women safe or keep our children safe or keep each other safe. Where do we fight and where do we stand and where do we bring peace and joy? Those are questions that many men are not having to ask themselves every day anymore. spending more time just being at work, just taking care of business and surviving, rather than stepping into the greatness of what it is and what's offered by being a man in this country. So, black or white, it really, young or old, whatever your demographic is, being a man in this country is a high honor, and it's a difficult task. It's the recipe book is not well written, and we try to emulate our leaders or our role models, and do our very best to be a good man. But a lot of that really is about taking a stand, about protecting our families, protecting our tribe, and many of us have lost we'll say the inherent sort of reflex of being that person. So instead of stepping into our greatness, a lot of us are shying away or even contracting or hiding. And, we're not using our imagination as much as we would. And imagination and creativity, innovation, generativity, these are the things that really we're here on earth to provide. These are things that we were given gifts in this area. And for those of you who feel like you're not creative, if you made it this far in life, if you made it this far today, you are creative. Let me tell you that. It takes something to get all your pieces in a row, wake up every morning, find your clothes, get started with the day, finding a purpose, start walking, start eating, start taking care of your pets or your family or whatever you got going on. It takes something, and that's called creativity. You've had to move around a lot of things, make lots of decisions every single second about what's going to be the next thing you do and who's going to be the next person you talk to, and what kind of person are you going to be. These are questions that require creativity. So there's no such thing as somebody who's not creative, who's still alive.
And that leads to me back to the thing where you was talking about, now we're the second highly intellectual being on Earth. Whereas although the computer seems systematic and is built on algorithms, but the computer or the AI can really tell us more about ourselves. It gives you those cat clips because it knows you love cats. It gives you those Michael Jordan videos because it knows you love Michael Jordan. It knows you, and that creative brain is like, let me give you more of what it is that you like. And this is where we are now. Like when I work with seniors, and I teach yoga and mindfulness in senior citizen facility. So my first thing when I work with kids, my thing is youth and young adults. I'm teaching in the city school systems for people that would not necessarily have these practices. So my first thing there is to get them to calm down, to get them to pay attention, to get them to listen to themselves, to get them to move. Is really about mobility. We have a huge mobility problem in the earth. I mean, flexibility, to get them to be more flexible. Because I teach, if you can be flexible in your body, you can be flexible in your mind. To get them to not intrude on anybody else's space. Your mat is your mat. You can't intrude in someone else's mat. So distance and all of these little cues, social cues, right? When I'm working with seniors, it's to get them to tap back into mobility. Sometimes they believe that they can't move their arm anymore because they haven't moved it in a while. But to get them on motor skills, right? And how do we do that? We move as much as you can. And if you can't move, imagine yourself moving. Once you can see it here, it starts happening there. So you know how joyful it is to have someone who couldn't move their arm past here to wave at you?
Yeah.
And this is not aspirin. This is not Ben Gay. This is you. And this is your mind. This is your mat. We don't say I can't. We come in with zero-based thinking. We can. And if we can't, if we physically can't, we can do it in our heads.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the power of imagination again.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm so big on imagination. Go ahead.
No, that's what you're saying. And if you can't do it physically, you can do it in your head by using your imagination. You can almost get the same experience doing it in your head and visualizing it than whether or not you can touch yourself or touch your toes or whatever your situation is, whatever is you're physically being challenged for.
And we mask the same way we mask our emotions, we mask these pains in our bodies. And our bodies tell a story, right? So can you talk about the dynamic between mind, the mind and the physical body, and how the mind houses, the body houses what we might be trying to suppress physically or emotionally?
Yeah, so we are not our bodies. Our body is part of who we are, but we are not our body. And, we often, that's kind of the issue. We're all very afraid. It's almost like it's built in, it's hardwired that we're afraid to die. We're afraid more than anything of the only thing that's
That's
inevitable in
promised.
all work. The only promise that you have, the only thing that you can be certain of is you're going to die. And it's really convenient that that's also the thing that you're most afraid of in the whole world. Like, the thing that is the only thing that is guaranteed to happen in this lifetime is the thing you're most afraid of in this lifetime. No wonder we're a fear-based culture, and the only thing that each and every one of us is facing, the one thing that we dread the most. And, people die and we get very sad about it. And, we think, and all that's really happening is that their physical body is being taken away from them at that point. We don't know what really happens to life. We don't really know. People talk about reincarnation or different forms of eternal life that are out there. And we don't really have a very good idea of what life is about on the other side of death. We just don't. It's kept from us. So, our body, when our body is in pain or discomfort, I do try to work out every day or do some walking. It's a good vessel to keep, to keep in good shape, or to have it be that I can, maybe be flexible or take longer walks, or, move areas that would otherwise be tight or in some degree of pain or discomfort. So the mind and the body and the mind and the body and the emotions and the spirituality, there are things that we can do to actually integrate those things together. So you already mentioned a few, but, in the world of breathing, breathing techniques, using breathing exercises like Wim Hof or box breathing can be very helpful. Or, we look at gratitude. Every morning I wake up and I say 10 things that I'm very grateful for to start my day. That included this morning, just a few hours ago. Or meditation, like you talked about. As a mindfulness coach, when you have a mantra or you have a focal attentive point, and you can let your world happen in front of you, through you, around you, to you, and then come back to center, you can start realizing that you are not your world. Your world is happening around you and through you and to you, but you don't have to become those disempowering experiences as they occur. So you're able to separate yourself and return to center and find mindfulness that way. Nature also provides for that. Creativity also provides for that. Being of service also provides for that. Spirituality also provides for that. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong also provide for that. Super awesome nutrition can provide for that. Hydration can provide for that. Taking care of their sleep hygiene, or taking care of your pets, or, actually having authentic conversation. All of those things can provide for that. Taking a look at the divinity of the fullness and the infinite nature of the world itself, realizing that the world does not take place inside of this head of mine. The world does not take place inside of these four walls. This is a huge world that we have here, and the opportunity to really get and stand into, what may be a little closer to what's really happening. I don't think anybody has a clue what's really happening. I don't think I've ever met anybody. There's some people who had a general idea that was worth reading or something like that. I mean, there are some people out there who've made some, big hits into the human evolution chain. You don't know shit. You don't have any idea what's really happening.
And it's funny that you would say that, because we look to you to know what's happening.
Well, here's what's happening. One thing that's happening is that people are walking around acting like they think they know what's happening, and they don't. One thing is happening.
I like that one. So why are you podcasting? What is your purpose? What is your message? If there was one takeaway that people can get from our conversation.
Yeah, so, I like podcasting. I think it's an open space. It's still the Wild West. We get to own our own content. When we're done with this, you get to say whatever you want to say. I get to say whatever I want to say. We're not going to be censored. No one's going to steal this episode and not let it air. There's still a lot of freedom to say what you say, what you believe, and believe what you say, and share it with another person, and show what connection is. and really show the power of what human connection is. Be humorous and be fun, and also be serious and look straight up at the things that are happening in our world, both internally and in a small scale, a community scale, maybe in a country scale or a world scale, and just kind of take a peek at your present perspective of what's going on. Much of what you think is going on is based on some theories that you have accepted as fact that aren't even true.
And we push it, right? We push these narratives.
Yeah.
I've been really heavy on talking about worldview and worldview narratives, because when you grow up looking through the world through one lens, and someone can bring you all the facts and you still see it the same way. And it took me years. I grew up in a very argumentative community. We are, who's the best rapper? Who's the best? Who's there? Everybody fighting and going to fist fights and all that machismo, And it's like we wasted a lot of energy trying to get somebody to change something that they will never change.
Yeah.
You have been cultured to view the world through your lens, be it through your education, be it through your personal experience. And I'm pretty sure in my first business was construction, and they started construction schools, was in the New York area. And my partner would tell guys who would go to those Apex, that the book can't teach you this stuff, man. You got to come out here and learn it. And a lot of the stuff that the book taught you when you started out, when you tried to take that book to the field, you realize that, you had to go out and learn it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the book doesn't teach books are great to read. I love reading great books. I think they're great. People have written some very, very beautiful, very powerful, life-changing things down into the printed word. So I truly do appreciate good books. I've just gotten a couple recent books that I'm super excited to break into. I buy books every single week. And, normally I don't even get to open them because I end up being so busy being distracted with all the world in front of me. And I spend time scrolling, or I spend time just taking business or emails or texting or double checking my investments or double checking my social media hits or my communities or whatever. And it's hard to actually sit down, clear my mind enough to actually get one of these incredible books down. There's some incredible writers out there who have made such a huge difference in society. And, all you have to do is open up to a page of their writing and it'll change your world. And it's kind of cool that humanity has all this capacity to create and innovate and generate ways of being that actually manage the misery that's inevitable. What do I mean that the misery is inevitable? Let's take a moment at this. Siddhartha, Gautama, he sat underneath that tree for a long time, right? It took a number of days and he sat underneath that tree and he just sat and sat and sat and he reconciled everything. He worked out all of life, every bit of life. And then at some point he decided, okay, it's time to get up, right? At some point he had to get up, right? At some point he's like, okay, that's cool. I'm done. The marathon's over. I'm going to get up now. Do you get that when he made that decision, he was not done yet? He had looked at everything and he still couldn't reconcile the fact that misery was inherent in our living lives. It must have been a hard moment for him because he had been looking at that straight up for a number of days. What are we supposed to do about this? And he never got to the other side of that. He basically stood up and said, you know what? Misery's part of the deal.
Yeah, and I'm making myself miserable trying to etch misery out.
Right, exactly. We spend so much time fighting misery that rather than incorporating it as being as an exquisite part of life, in fact. I'm not different than anyone else. I'm not looking forward to my next miserable event. I'm really not. I don't like misery any more than anyone else. But when I can step back and somehow negotiate the idea that it might be a super gift, that even being in a lot of pain or being afraid or being, disturbed in some way might be a very real gift, an opportunity to taste the entire smorgasbord. One thing we have to get is that although we are living in difficult times, no doubt, we are sure getting a taste of multiple different ways of being alive. And for that, what a super gift inside of a smorgasbord, which includes a lot of, rotten lemons, rotten peanuts. I understand it's not all good food. It's not all tasty, but it's all there. And we are sure getting a full-time fire hose hit of what it means to be a human. That's for sure.
My last question for you, what books have impacted you? What books would you suggest to anybody? Fiction, nonfiction, doesn't have to be something that you read in now. What are your books that you would go to?
Yeah. So, I do get asked this a fair often when we talk about books. Like, I just got a book on the Kabbalah, the 4 steps of the Kabbalah, and that just came in yesterday. And I'm so eager. I can't wait to open that book up. I don't have any idea when I'm going to get to it. But I really do love the Torah. I love the Bible. I love the Torah. I love the Kabbalah. I don't get to read it as often as I like, but there's no book like it. There just isn't.
There isn't.
There just isn't. I don't care what any.
Well, because when you read it, it's like you were just telling a story about the guy on the tree. I immediately thought about the Solomon. All things are vanity. He was contemplating everything. It is the wisest man, sitting down, contemplating everything, and he leaves this beautiful memoir. And the conclusion is, shit don't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And there's contemporary, right? There's Sartre, there's Sartre and Camus. I like those group. There's a great psychologist, Carl Rogers, and great psychiatrist, Irving Yalom. There's almost wherever you look, there's great strategists, there's great marketers out here. There's great, even, the Russell Brunson and Grant Cardone and Alex Hormozi. Those are really interesting people on how to work the online system, and different ways so different direction books are really interesting. Like I said, Malcolm Gladwell or Harari's got a new book called Nexus. It sounds really fun to read, or biographies or autobiographies. I have one for RFK. I have one for Elon Musk. It's like, how did these guys become who are they? What happened to make Elon Musk so ridiculously powerful in this one lifetime? Like, what happened? I'm not talking about whether you like him or not. That isn't the point.
No, yeah.
How did the dude get to be freaking Elon Musk anyhow? And what really happened in this lifetime to make him who he is? I mean, the same kind of thing. I like reading about sports. I like reading about music. But I think the book among all books, if I had to lean on it, there's only one book out there. Everything else is a makeup. Everything else is a copy. Everything else is a wannabe. There's only one book to even really care about in my world.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Listen, you can walk labeling yourself or allowing people's labels to live in your head, and you take it on as an excuse. And we don't make excuses. Those of you who are part of our family, we walk in victory. We don't ask you for Venmos, Cash Apps, or any of those things, but what we do ask is that you hit like and that you hit subscribe. That helps us go up on the algorithm. If you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, we ask that you would leave that review 5 stars, preferably. And if you are not on the platform that allows you to leave the review, you can always go to our website, walkinvictory.me, and leave a review there. All of Fred's information is in the description and on the landing page on our website. Go follow him on his social handles and let him know that you heard from him here on our show, Walk in Victory. Enjoy the rest of your day. Rest in peace to one of the greatest musicians that have impacted our lives. And then Mr. Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Peace. He sure got the hell out of here just in